All right, so today we're going to start with section 13.2, and we're going to take a look at something called consumer credit. So the first thing I'm going to let you write down is what consumer credit is. Consumer credit refers to borrowing money, specifically to purchase something. So we're not talking about savings accounts in this section at all. Last section could apply to either saving money, investing money, or to borrowing money. This section is all about borrowing, okay? Consumer credit typically refers to buying things like cars, furniture, appliances, maybe it's jewelry, whatever it is that you're purchasing. Technically, it also applies to purchasing a home, but there's some nuances with the purchasing a home, so we don't usually see it sort of built in with this particular section. So we're going to talk about the home stuff when we get to section 13.4. Okay, so ignore home ownership. This is all the other things you might purchase that have the ability to have loans attached to them. All right, so there's two different types of consumer credit we're going to talk about in this section. The first type is called a closed-end credit, okay? So the closed-end credit is the purchase of these particular items that you're most specifically mentioned in here, things like cars. And I tend to think of the car loan because that's probably the most common one that you see done this way. Other items of here may end up having a credit card attached, and those are not closed-end loans. Okay, so we're going to talk about the credit card part in a second, but right now we're talking about the closed-end loans. So these are installment loans. They actually have a certain amount of time that from the get-go of the loan, you're told you're going to pay off in this number of months or years. Okay, there's a specific time frame over which you pay something back. Installment loan or a closed-end credit. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to actually go through a case scenario, okay? And we're going to meet a couple, and their names are Ann and Andy, okay? And Ann and Andy are going to do a lot of things with us over the next couple of days, next couple of class periods. We're going to see them make a lot of financial decisions and learn about the ramifications of the decisions they make. So here's their first decision. They've got a refrigerator, and it dies unexpectedly, okay? And so they're in the middle of paying off debt, and they don't have the cash to buy a new refrigerator. Against their better judgment, they're going to go and they're going to finance one, which is obviously against their better judgment if the whole goal was to pay off the things that they owed. And now they're going to go borrow more money. But that's what they've decided. So they go to one of these stores that offers this kind of a deal. And you guys have seen them all the time. They're everywhere, right? They make a deal where they say something like this. If you'll pay off the amount of the product in a certain number of time frame, you get 0% interest. Everybody's seen that before, right? Okay, it's offered all the time at different stores. This store offers 6 months interest-free financing. As long as Ann and Andy pay off the fridge in those 6 months, then they don't have to pay any of the finance charges. Everybody with me on that? Okay. The store requires a $200 down payment on the $2,000 refrigerator. Okay, so we haven't actually talked about down payment. Most of you probably have a familiar idea of what that is. That just means the amount of money we have to pay today, and we get to take the refrigerator home even though we didn't pay for the whole amount. Okay. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how much money they have to finance. All right, so there's not really a formula per se. I mean, you can write one down. You're welcome to here in a moment. I'm not going to write one because the amount of financing is simply how much money you're borrowing. Okay, so how much did the refrigerator cost? $2,000. But they pay for part of it, right? How much do they pay? $200. So they're not really borrowing $2,000.
$18,000.
Not quite. How about $1,800?
$1,800.
Yes.
Fine.
All right, so we take the amount that the purchase price is, and in essence, we're subtracting off the down payment. And whether you write down that piece or not, that's what you're doing. And when you do that, you find out that they're going to finance, that is, they're going to borrow. So when it asks about the amount to be financed, it's asking about how much they're borrowing. They're going to finance, they're going to borrow $1,800. Everybody good so far? Okay. Simple subtraction. Now, here's the next thing. How much would they then need to pay in order per month to avoid finance charges?
Okay,
So what would I do?
$1,800 paid within 6 months. That would equate to $300.
Okay, so we're going to divide, right, Leah? We're going to take the $1,800 that we borrowed. Hang on, Terry. These are yours.
So we're
to take that $1,800 that we have borrowed, and if we paid it off in the 6 months we're supposed to, we would then divide by 6 months to figure out how much we would pay per month, and we would get $300. So if we pay off our $300 a month, we are golden and we have beat the system, right? This is what everybody thinks they're going to do when they go take this loan. And then life happens, as it does to Ann and Andy. If they're unable to pay off the fridge at the end of the 6 months, something else happens. You know, this is what the store's counting on, right? They're counting on the majority of the people not being able to do this, whether it's because of discipline or because life happening, Murphy comes in and moves into your spare bedroom. I don't know what happens, but something happens, and you end up not paying the whole money off. Yes?
I worked at a furniture store, and they had 6 months no interest. It's 25% interest after the 6 months.
I believe it. We're going to see something really interesting happen. We're going to use 12% in our problem, but you're very readily going to see it become bigger than what it sounded like it was going to be. All right, so here's what happens, and this is typically what happens, is that time frame over which you borrowed that $1,800, they go and they backdate the interest. Okay? So it's not like at 6 months they start charging you interest going forward. I mean, they do. Don't get me wrong. They make no mistake. They make you charge that interest. But they actually charge you interest for the part that you already borrowed it for too. Okay, that's the catch right there, is you did not get 0% interest for 6 months. It was only under the condition that you paid it off in that 6 months. Now, your book's going to give you some examples where that doesn't happen too. But I want to show you the way that it really would happen in most situations. Okay, so that's where we're going to start. All right, so how much interest would be added on after 6 months if they fail to make any payments towards the loan? Okay, so if they fail to make any payments toward the loan, this is asking you for an add-on interest. Let me mark this on here. Add-on interest is the same or another phrase for simple interest, which we happen to have the formula on the board for at the moment. Right? This is my simple interest formula right here. And this one right here, depending on what we're looking for.
And they'll be putting a payment, putting the balance off over
All right,
the
so
next 2 years.
yeah, we're not quite there yet, though. All right, so on part C, it just asks for how much interest we would be charged. Which one of those two formulas is going to give me that value? I circled the two that apply in this situation. Which one?
The first one.
The first one, because it's the interest formula one, right? It actually just tells me the amount of interest. Because that's what it says, is how much interest. Remember I told you last time, the best thing that's going to be to your advantage in this particular section is to make sure you're answering the question that's asked. Because they're going to ask questions that sound very similar. So be careful you're answering what's asked. This question asks how much interest. Okay? So this is I equals PRT. What is P?
Principal was the
That's my 1,800. That's right, Ethan. It's the amount that they borrowed. What is R? 0.12. You got it, Tara. And then what is T? Time, and it's 1/2. It's 6 months, but out of a year, so it's a half. Exactly. You guys got it. So we're getting that 0.5 because it's half of a year. Does everybody get where the 0.5 is coming from? Because in this problem, we're not talking about, don't jump the gun. There's another question here in a minute about what happens going forward. This question is talking about what happens in the past. What happened to that 6-month time frame where they failed to make any payments? Okay? So we're going to take 1,800, 0.12, and 0.5, and we're going to figure out how much interest we are going to now owe for that past 6 months. And it's a dollar amount, so of course we're going to put a dollar sign. How much is this going to be? 108. That is exactly right. So you might look at that and say, okay, well, that's not that bad. So let's see what happens as we continue down this line of owing this amount of money. So part C was finding out the amount of interest. Part D then is how much money is total to be repaid. That's a slightly different question. So how do I find out how much is total to be repaid? Well, there's two issues here. There's the total that I owe today, like if I were to go in any situation and how much I owe today. That's the new amount that I owe. And then there's the amount that I owe going forward, because it said in the problem, I didn't read the entire thing, but it said in the problem about this 2 years business, going forward 2 years, right? So there's two pieces to take into consideration. There's the consideration for how much I owed going backwards and how much I'm going to owe going forward. Does everybody understand that piece? We've got two pieces on this one. If we didn't have this backdated interest, we wouldn't have this feature, okay? But we do on this particular example. So the first thing we're going to figure out is how much my new principal is. That is, if I were now able to go in and pay off the amount, what would I owe today after 6 months of not making a payment? So how would I figure that?
18 plus 4.
Perfect. So it's the $1,800, the original amount I borrowed, plus the $108, which is the amount that accrued in interest over my time of not paying. So what is my new principal?
That is 1908.
Perfect, 1908. So we now owe 1908. If we go and we pay 1908 off, then we're done with this loan. But if we weren't able to make the payments for 6 months, unless some rich relative passed away or mom and dad gave me a bonus check or something like that, probably not going to be able to come up with a 1908 on the spot either. So we're going to move forward with the problem as it was designed. That is, we're going to move forward with this 2-year payment plan by this company. Everybody with me? Okay. So now, moving forward, we've still got this add-on interest. This add-on interest is still 12% moving forward, but now we're moving forward over the course of 2 years. So we're actually asked, what is the total amount? Now, this is different than the last question, right? The last question asked us for what? How much interest? And this one's asking me for the total amount. So, Ethan, do you know which formula we're going to use then? Well, it'll be the second one because this is still add-on interest. So, yes, of these two, it's the bottom one that's circled. Yes. So we're going to end up using our formula that's A equals P times 1 plus RT. But what is P? It is now 1908. It is not 1800 anymore, right? We now owe 1908. That is currently the amount that we owe for the fridge because we had the original 1800 plus the 108 for the interest that we didn't actually make any payments on. Then we have 1 plus. What's my interest rate? 0.12. And the time? Now we've got 2 years. Now I know we worked a little bit, and we'll do it a little bit more today on calculator usage here to be careful. But we can work this either inside out, depending on how your calculator cooperates with parentheses and whatnot, or you can go from left to right if your calculator will accommodate that. So if you're working inside out, you start with the innermost parenthesis with the multiplication. So you guys can all do this in your head, the inside part. What is 0.12 times 2? 0.24 plus 1? 1.24. So this is actually 1908 times 1.24. And what is the A value that we get? What is our amount we're going to owe?
$2,365.90.
You mean it's not $1,800? It's not. Yes, Tara.
So the amount would be, you wouldn't count the 6 months into the 2 years. It would be 2 years plus the 6 months that you didn't pay.
Exactly. Because what happens is the add-on interest is figured first for the backdated time, and that new principal is what's used going forward for how much we now owe. Yes, so it's a two-step problem. There's the part looking backwards because I need that number to figure out what my new principal is to move forward. Yes?
This is also saying that they didn't pay all the 6 months.
Exactly. If they'd paid part of it, we would have to calculate a different calculation. So like let's say, for instance, they were able to pay off $1,000 of it or whatever. Well, then we would almost consider that $1,000 with the $200 almost like the down payment would have been considered, and we would be using our new principal right here of $800 to calculate all of things moving forward. Yeah. Yes, Brittany?
So not only are they paying more, the cost or the value amount of the fridge is going down.
That is exactly right. And that's exactly what happens every time you drive a car off a car lot, right? With a loan attached to it, dragging behind it and whatnot, yeah. Yeah, is that the amount that you're paying for the product is going up while the value of the product is going down. And almost all products do that. There's only one product that sometimes doesn't. Do you know what it is? It's not wine. And it's not diamonds either, by the way. Diamonds do not go up to value. Yeah, houses sometimes will do that, right? You have to be careful because there's been this misconception, of course, over time that houses always do that. And if you've lived through the last maybe 5 years or so, you've recognized that doesn't always happen. So houses will sometimes not do that, something not go down in value. Some houses do go down in value. Those are called trailer parks. Those do go down in value. And I'm not being mean about that. They really do go down in value. All right, so let's take a look at what happens then. So now we don't owe $1,800. We owe $2,365.92, and it probably came in the form of some kind of a bill at the very end of my 6 months, and the credit card company that issued this loan, not really a credit card, but whoever issued this loan, would say, okay, you no longer owe us $1,800. Now you owe us $2,365.92. And it looks a bit mysterious to you because they don't show you all the calculations. It looks weird. It looks like they all of a sudden charged you, I don't know, somewhere around $500 more for the product, right? And they tell you now you're going to make payments per month. So if I make payments over the next 2 years, how would I figure out my monthly payment?
Okay, 2 years is 24 months.
24 months. So what am I going to do with 24 months? Someone over here. Right. So I'm going to take the amount that I owe, $2,365.92, and I'm going to use the 24 months. Be careful because it's really easy to not take into consideration either the fact that 12 months are in a year or that you've got 2 years going on. I see sometimes people dividing this by 12. Remember, we're doing this particular case over 2 years, so we need 24. All right, so what does this end up being? 98 what? 58? Okay, thanks, Montana. 58. All right, so almost $100 a month we're going to pay. Okay, so far so good? Everybody understands what Ann and Andy have done? Yes? Okay, I believe we have one more question about Ann and Andy. The question is, what is the total cost of the refrigerator, including all this interest they're going to pay? There's lots of ways you could do this problem, okay, based on the information you've done above. So does somebody have any suggestion? What could you do? Okay, so we first need to remember that we already paid $200 for the fridge. No matter what we're doing, we're going to have to add that $200 back in because that was actually the first payment, if you will. Then what? What's that? So what do you mean by what's already been paid, Ethan? Can you tell me? Because we have our $200, that's actually what we already paid. Now we're on this payment plan, right? Moving forward. So what's happening on this payment plan? Yeah, and we're making exactly the same amount of payments every month. So let's say we didn't know the total amount. My monthly payment amount is $98.58. And I'm going to do that for how long? 24 months or 2 years, right? So I could, if I didn't already know it, take the $98.58 and multiply by 24, right? My monthly payment times the number of months I'm going to do this for. Now, that's actually something we did already, sort of, right? We divided this number by 24 before to get the number over here. We know how much they're going to end up paying. We did that on Part D. They're going to pay $2365.92. So I could get there directly by simply taking the $2365.92, and this part was from Part, was it D? What part was that? E? This is from Part E. D? It was D, you're right, thank you. I looked at my paper wrong. Okay, so that's from Part D. So what does this end up costing, this fridge? Not $2,000, right? Okay. Now, we could ask lots of questions about this. One question I could ask you then is, okay, so how much did they pay for the luxury of borrowing the money? And you should be able to answer that question. How much did they actually pay? How much did this transaction cost them? Exactly, $565.92. And we get that by taking that value that we've paid minus the actual cost of the product, the $2,000, right? Okay. The other thing that we could talk about is how much of an interest rate we really ended up paying. Because it sort of looked like it was 12%. This is what it looks like. It was not 12%. So how do you figure that out? Well, if you were to take, and this is just for your benefit, you don't need to write this down. I'm just going to show you how you would actually figure this if you were concerned with what is the real interest rate. If you were to take that $565.92 and divide by the original $2,000 that the cost of the product was. So somebody do this with me. Just Sarah, would you do this for me? Would you divide? Okay. So take $565.92 and divide by 2,000. You're going to get a decimal. What decimal do you get?
0.28296.
Okay, and then we're going to multiply by 100 to find it as a percentage.
28.296.
Okay, I'm going to do 28.3 for the moment.
Yep, that's
We did not pay 12%. How much did we pay?
28.3.
28% for having done that. That's a big interest rate. Almost, well, no, it's more than double what they told me I was paying, right? Because it was calculated differently. Agreed? This is the interest rate for the amount that we have of the increase. This is the interest rate for the actual interest. That's not the word I want. Yeah, the interest. That was right. It is the interest rate for the amount of interest I was paying right there.
The 28 is the total amount of interest
Yes.
going back.
Yes, if you start from the beginning till the end of when you're actually paid the product off.
So with the 12%, they just see what it would look like after that 6-month period.
The 12% was added on in 2 increments twice. That's part of why. Because you're getting, remember we talked about last time about compound interest being interest on interest? That's part of what's going on here, right? Because we had the initial 12% that we paid, and then we paid a 12% on top of that. And that's how that's happening. And the other thing that is happening is it's over 2 years instead of it just being a 1-year interest rate, which is also causing things to increase more rapidly. Okay? All right, so this is Ann and Andy's situation. I want to show you one other, we'll talk more about Ann and Andy in the next lesson. But I want to talk about one more thing in this section, and that is revolving loans. These are open-ended credit. So this is the plastic that people carry in their wallet. At least some people do. All right, so revolving loans are open-ended credit. So the difference primarily, so I could still go and buy the refrigerator if I were Ann and Andy on a credit card. Agreed? Okay, the primary difference is that these do not have a specific number of payments over a specific time frame. It's open-ended. There's a minimum. Granted, there's a minimum, but it's not set to a specific time frame. Okay, the minimum is usually based on how much you owe versus how much you have borrowed out and have open credit ability and things like that. Okay, so this has no fixed number of payments, no fixed time, and generally speaking, there's not a fixed, although there's a minimum, but there's not a fixed amount that you have to pay above that minimum. Okay? Okay, so an itemized billing is what you get from the credit card company at the end of every month. So I'm not going to take a show of hands about who has a credit card, but some of you do. When I was your age, I did. We don't actually have credit cards anymore. My husband and I haven't had credit cards for 2.5 years. Okay? But this is the bill that they send you at the end of the month that tells you this was your starting balance. This is how much you borrowed when you went out to Chili's, and this is how much you borrowed when you went over and you pulled money out of the ATM, and then this is how much money you made your payment when you made your payment, and then you had this refund from Walmart because you took something back, and you've got this sort of a plus minus categories all the way down. Okay? That's an itemized billing. It tells you a few other things. It tells you the minimum that you owe. It tells you the total amount that you owe, and it tells you the interest that you've paid per that time frame. It tells you a lot of information, including, in addition to this sort of plus and minus kind of a tally. Because you see, the plus and minus tally, that happens on your bank accounts too, right? As well as the interest potentially that you made if you have an interest-bearing account. It's just that this piece is also going to have a few more pieces of information because it's a loan. Okay. Are we good with the writing on this slide?
Yep.
Mostly. Carrie, are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So here's a few things that are happening or features about this itemized billing. One is there's finance charges, and there's lots of different kinds of finance charges depending on what kind of a card you're working with or a company you're working with. One is the interest. So you may have some people who say, I pay my amount off every month, and so they don't ever show an interest value. Okay, that's a possibility. There's an annual fee on some cards, not all cards, but some cards actually cost you every year to have the luxury of having the piece of plastic in your wallet. Make no mistake, you paid for that piece of plastic. They did not give it to you free. Okay?
That is why I have a debit card.
Sometimes there is a credit insurance coverage. There's a charge for that one. And there's a time payment differential or carrying charges. We're going to see how that works in a little bit. It's kind of a long title for what's happening, but you're going to see it in a minute what that happens to be. And that affects what's called the average daily balance method. Now, for people who do pay their credit card literally off every month, most credit cards allow you that grace period to borrow that money and to pay it right back. So this average daily balance method doesn't come into play. Who this affects is someone who does have a monthly carryover charge from the month before. So you owed $500 last month, and for whatever reason you were only able to pay $300 of it, so you carried over $200 you still owed. If you do that, then this average balance method typically is how a company will figure out how much you owe them for the next month. Okay? This is a weighted mean. This isn't a difficult mathematical process, but that's what the words are. It's a weighted mean of the various amounts of credit you utilized. So was there a cash advance? It's like an ATM charge. Did you make a payment to, go out to play golf? That's what my husband would have done. Did you make a payment, or not a payment, but did you make a charge? Did you make a payment to pay something off? That is, maybe you returned a particular item, or maybe you actually physically wrote a check for, or you used your, cash for paying off a part of what you owed. Okay, so all of those things are going to come into play with this weighted mean.
Okay.
Very close, Leah.
Okay.
Yeah, you said hold it 4 times, so that's why I'm asking. Are we close?
Okay.
Okay, all right. So let's take a look at how this works with an example. For the following credit card account, assume 1 month between billing dates. Okay, so if it's billed on May 9th, it's going to be billed on June 9th, and it's going to be billed on July 9th. That's the 1 month between billing dates with the appropriate number of days. The interest is 1.3% per month. Notice it is not a per year amount for this, it's a per month because we're talking about a monthly billing cycle. And we're going to find A, the average daily balance, B, the monthly finance charge, and C, the account balance for the next billing. So we're going to find several things. As we're doing this, we're going to be finding them in terms of a table. We're going to create a chart, okay? So you can see this sort of a listing on your paper, right? Everybody sees the listing of several different things that this particular family or whatever has done. All right, so the previous amount that they owed, does yours say 728 or 727?
728.
Okay, mine does too on my paper, so I'm going to fix this. All right, so 728.36. Pretend that says an 8. Doesn't look real good. We have a May 9th billing date, okay? We're going to be working on average daily balance and so forth, but we can't find any of those things until we fill out this chart. Okay, so you have more space to fill in your chart than I do, but we're all going to be okay. So I'm going to draw some lines in here, as should you. Leave yourself a fair amount of space, but you're going to need 3 columns. Okay. The first column is your running balance column. All right, let's do it this way.
Oh boy.
That didn't work very well, did it?
A need for running balance. Oh. Uh-oh.
All right. Our running balance is simply the addition subtraction thing. If you have online banking or something like this, this is just what it shows. So if I previously owed $728.36, and that's the initial amount on my running balance. So this is $728.36. And then I make a payment of $200. So what happens? I subtract $200. So what do I end up with, Brandon?
That would be
Brandon, can you tell me? Perfect. $528.36. Everybody's with me so far. Next thing you do is you go out to dinner. This particular people did. And they went out to dinner and it cost $46.11. So what happens? This time we will add 4611 to the amount that we owe. So what does that give me? All these are dollar amounts, by the way. Let's put my dollar signs in. Carrie, do you have a calculator? Did you get that one? Did you get, oh, Trent has it. That's okay. What do you have?
574.47.
Perfect. All right, and then we go to the theater on June 3rd, 6450. What do I do? I add it again, because again, this is actually something that I borrowed money for. I owe more money back now on this, so I'm going to add this in. So what happens when I add 6450 to this? 96? 97, sorry. Did not hear that very well. Perfect. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to figure out the number of days we owed each amount of these monies, okay? So we start with May 9th, okay? So there's no date that I need to put in there for the May 9th. Or I'm sorry, there is, because it was, what did it say? It? Yeah, no, good. All right, so we're going to be looking from May 9th to May 17th. How many days passed from May 9th to May 17th? 8 days. So for 8 days, we owed $728.36. Make sense? So for 8 days, if I went out on May 10th and May 11th and May 12th, and I went out there every single day until May 17th, it would have said every single one of those days, you owe $728.36, $728.36. So for 8 days, that's how much money I owed. Everybody good so far? Okay. Then I make this payment of $200. So between May 17th and May 30th, I owe a different amount than I did earlier. How many days do I owe that new amount? 13 days, because there are 13 days from the 17th to the 30th. Here's where you have to remember the little ditty that tells you how many days are in a month. This is May. May has 30 or 31. I heard two answers. 31. There are 31 days in May, so we're going to count forward from May 30th to June 3rd. How many days passed from the 30th to the 3rd? 4. My daughter and I talked about which days have how many months the other day, actually. So, yes, so there's 4 days. That would be different if I were working in a different month. If I were working in April, I wouldn't have gotten 4, correct? So you have to remember what month you're in. You can't just count with the number of days. You have to remember the number of days. Okay. After May 30th, I go from May 30th to June 3rd. Oh, sorry, that was my 4 days. After June 3rd, I go from June 3rd to June 9th. Okay, this is the last entry on my credit card statement. They send me out a new credit card statement, and it says a new date of billing of the 9th, because it's always billing on the same day. That's what I was told at the beginning of the problem. So how many days are going to pass from June 3rd to June 9th? 6 days.
Oh.
Okay, so does everybody understand how I get this amount right here? Perfect. Here's what you do next. You multiply those two columns together. Okay? So you're going to multiply 728 times 8, and then 528 times 13 all the way down. That's my last column. My last column is the balance times the days. All right, it's just going to have to say day, because if I push the button, if I get any closer to the edge, it pushes the button that changes my screen. So mine's just going to say days. Day, rather, instead of days. All right, so I need some help with these numbers. All right, so Laramie, can you give me the first one?
5,826.
88. Okay, Holly, do you have the second one?
68,
Oh, Trent's got it. All 6 8s? 6868.68? Awesome. Okay, how about I'll let Holly get the next one?
2,297.88.
Excellent. And then Sarah, let me let you get the last one.
3833.82.
Okay, everybody good so far? Lots of good calculations for your calculator to do without you having to do it by hand, right? Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to find, in fact, take a look back at the directions. Part A says find the average daily balance. Well, you just found the balance each day times the number of days. The way you find your average things, think about how you average your grade. Okay, you've got 5 tests in the class, so how do you find your test average? Add them all up and divide by 5. So we're going to do here too. We're going to add all these balances at the very end, this summation over here up, and we're going to divide by what do you suppose?
Balance each of that the days.
Divide by what was that, Leah?
The The total number of days?
The total number of days in the month, because this is the average per day. So again, that depends on the month you're working with. This particular month there is 31. So I'm going to average this out over 31 days because it's a 31-day month. Okay? All right, so part A is going to take this summation and add them all together. Somebody can verify my number. I've got written down 18,827.26. That's what Sarah has too. We're going to go with it
How many
then.
days did you say?
We're going to do 31 days because it's a 31-day month. So my average daily balance is going to be to take that 18,827.26, and it's going to be to divide by 31 because there happen to be 31 days in particular in May. What is my average daily balance?
$607.33. Oh!
And by the way, this is what your credit union or your bank does too for your banking account. They find out your average daily balance. That's how they make your interest payments if you have an interest-bearing account at the end of the month. So it really doesn't do you any good to go make a huge deposit on, May 31st and then withdraw it on June 1st. You're not going to get any money. I mean, it's not going to work that way. They use an average amount in there too. All right, so average daily balance is $607.33. So on average throughout the month, you owe about $607 to this credit card company. All right. Part B said that we were supposed to find the monthly finance charge. All right, so what did it say the monthly interest rate was?
1.3.
1.3%. Okay? Okay. On your average balance of $607.33. So what do you suppose you're going to do with these? Great. 0.13, because that's, sorry, close. 0.13, right? 0.013 times the 607.33. What does that give you? It's not a real big number, so that's okay. What does it give you? $7.90. Okay, so the monthly finance charge, the amount that they're going to put on and then tack on at the end of the month for having had the luxury of making these charges is $7.90. Okay? And then part C, I'm going to go back over here one more time. It says the account balance for next billing. So how do I find the account balance for my next billing? Okay, what two am I going to add, Tara? Close. I'm going to add 790 to something, but it's not going to be to the 607. It's to the running balance. So it's this last balance right here that I had. I don't think mine looks quite right. I don't think I got it in there. What was my last balance supposed to say?
$648.97.
All right, my 8 got left out. All right. So we're going to add that 790 to the running balance, which was 638.97. Because that was the last amount we owed. Remember that 607 is actually an average amount. I didn't ever actually really owe an exact 607. That was an average. Okay. So, but I can take my running balance, which was the 638, add the 790, and what's my new balance for next month?
$646.80.
All right. Make sense? Now, let me make one comment before we leave the credit card section that you may or may not be aware of, but I wasn't aware of it until somebody had done the research and told me about the deal, and I thought, wow, I didn't know that. Not only are you paying more money on the interest if you keep this running balance, but did you know that, I can't remember the exact percent, maybe 14%, that's for some reason ringing a bell to me, is the amount of money you overpay for things when you use plastic over cash. Even your debit card. Debit cards are great. I use one too. But even when you swipe your debit card, now, if you're paying for gas, you pay what's ever on the pump and you don't have a choice. But I'll tell you what, I'm much more likely when I swipe my card to buy a little extra treat at McDonald's because it doesn't affect me as much as if I don't actually have the money in my wallet. So, and in fact, the statistic for McDonald's specifically was that people pay 40% more at McDonald's when they swipe their credit card or check card versus when they actually pay with cash. So that's the other sort of nuance to paying with plastic versus paying with cash that's sort of not listed here, that's affecting you whenever you do it. Kind of crazy, huh? All right, so I'm going to pause this one. We'll